way. These microphones up here are going to record everything you say. So shouldn't be anything new. All your stuff's already recorded and in the cloud anyway, just not in the Microsoft one. But maybe with this, we can balance the playing field a bit. So welcome everyone, Brisbane Azure User Group. Clicker works, that's good. So it is being recorded? Yep. We're all going. Okay, so November, if you're here for a different month, that's a problem. But if you're here for November, welcome. Before we go too far, I do want to put a big thank you out there to our sponsors. So without our sponsors, this would not be possible. So Codify, they provide all the beer and the pizza and all the great stuff for you guys online. Tough luck. Microsoft, they provide the venue and this lovely place for us to have our Azure group. Thank you very much. These sponsors are invaluable. So thank you very much. We're a community and we want to get involved, and it's an opportunity for anyone to get involved. And there's so many new faces here. I love it. It's amazing. If anyone wants to give a talk, it doesn't have to be anything fancy like tonight's. I'm sure tonight's going to be amazing. I always get ripped about my talks are not very, they're a little bit vaporware at the moment. So that's an ongoing joke. Thank you. But if you've got anything you want to share, we'd love to hear it. It doesn't have to be a big talk. It can be a little talk. It could be just your experiences with Azure. Anyone wants to talk to me about front door, I'm happy to talk about that forever. The new version sucks. Oh, it's getting better. The old version's a lot better. But you should use the new one. Jacob.
Is EF4 plus SQL Server fair game?
Yeah, I mean, like ideally you tie it into Azure in a little way.
Azure SQL.
Done.
Application Insights.
Yeah, there you go. Application Insights is amazing. It's one of the most underrated products in Azure, my personal opinion, and under leveraged. Like if someone would want to do a demonstration that included Application Insights and the paths and all those features, the UX sort of tracking features that, I don't know, people kind of gloss over, that'd be an amazing talk. I think there's some really cool stuff in App Insights that I kind of find most people aren't using, and maybe it's due to lack of awareness of what it can do. So yeah, absolutely go for it. It's really cool. All right, so Jason's up tonight. I'm not going to take too long. I promise. It's a whole promise. There's a few things to note just in our monthly updates. So a few things going on. So Windows Server 2012 reaches end of support. No longer going to receive any security updates. SQL Server 2014 is going to reach end of support pretty soon. So it's about 6 months away. They are offering extended support. I think it's 3 years. I did write it down there. 3 years. If you shift that workload into Azure, you can get 3 years of security patches if you're running it in Azure. If you're on premise with 2014, you're out of luck. You get nothing. Oh, sorry.
Can I add something that is related to this?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
Anyone using EF4.8, anything before SQL Server 2016 is no longer supported.
Yeah, there you go. So, even more incentive.
And also, if you are running on premises, you can use Azure Arc to get the extended support.
Oh, there you go. That's thinking outside the box. Yeah, Azure Arc is a fantastic option. So yeah, they can be in Azure on premise. It's really cool. TLS. So for those of you who like TLS 1 and 1.1, you're going to be out of luck pretty soon with Azure Storage. It's disappearing. Game over. So you're going to have to move to 1.2 pretty soon. 1st of November.
It's pretty cool.
Oh, 2024. Sorry. Next year. You got a year. I just looked at that wrong. Sorry. A few updates. All right. AKS regional DR. So this is where if you have an AKS server and you're having a critical failure, you can bring that up in one of those paired regions. So that's using Azure backup. You can also store that off site because it allows you to back up those files and bring that off site. So for that, it's a great sort of fail-safe scenario. Like if you really need to be able to show that you're addressing that complete failure of that data center, AKS or Kubernetes is tricky, right? Like it's tricky to get that multi-region stuff going in Kubernetes. This is a great option. It's not the only option. It's a great option to get that stuff going for AKS. BYOK, so bring your own keys to ephemeral disks for AKS. That's coming also. Oh, that's here. Sorry, it's gone GA. So that means you can actually use your own encryption keys and encrypt that data on your ephemeral disk. So disabling SSH, that's now possible with AKS. It's a bit of a typey thing to get that in there and disable that, but you can now do that in AKS. Dedicated host resize. I had this really wonderful image and pretty pictures there to entertain the mind. Just a very boring slide. Unfortunately, didn't make the cut, my pretty pictures, so I apologise for the lack of eye candy. But you can now easily, resize those dedicated hosts, move them up, get a bit more capacity. Synapse link. This one here is a little bit tricky. So if you have Synapse link, so this is, Azure Synapse link with Cosmos continuous backup, right? If you have a Azure Cosmos DB with continuous backup provisioned, you can now enable Synapse link into that, and that's going to now work. The tricky part is if you've already got that Synapse link connected up, you can't yet enable that continuous backup. So it's kind of like you have to read the fine print on that. It's a little bit of a works one way, not quite the other way yet. It is coming. MongoDB is coming with Synapse link. Azure Functions. There's a few things that happened with Azure Functions recently. We got a performance improvement around cold start. Azure Functions has always been a little bit sluggish. People use more colourful words than that, but let's just go with sluggish. And this is trying to address that. And so in that isolated worker process model, you're now getting a little bit more performance in that cold start scenario. Service Bus has now got a whole bunch more integration into that. So you're able to use settlement actions more effectively. Yeah, that's pretty much it. gRPC on Azure App Service, Linux only. That's all now supported. It's GA. It was in preview for quite a while. It's just gone GA, which is good news. And snippets for Azure Static Web Apps. So if you want to add your tracking, GA tracking or anything like that, you can now inject that in and via a snippet. Go on in. You can now inject that in via a snippet or anything like that. So just prepends or appends your actual static web app content with those snippets. So you can do kind of whatever you want. All right, that's pretty much it for the updates. This is something to keep track of. It's coming up pretty soon, next couple of days. We got coming up as well, so keep an eye out for that one. And DDD, that's always a good one.
Remarkably, DDD is still not sold out. Usually it's gone within like 24 hours.
Oh.
Still got a chance to buy.
Got a chance. Sign up now or forever hold your peace. Awesome. So a couple of resources. We do have a Slack channel. We've got a YouTube channel. There's a couple of learning items and a couple of blogs here that we follow. But tonight, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jason Taylor, solution architect, trainer, mentor, full stack developer, over 20 years of experience. Welcome. Tonight, we're going to talk about Azure Developer CLI. Looking forward to it. Should be wonderful.
Cheers, mate.
That's the USB-C, but if you. There it is. Oh, you want to use the audio.
Spend all my time in front of the laptop.
Well, and then you come meeting and share it. That's. Big, well, but that's on our priority list. Because it's.
Let me just give me a few minutes to set up and I'll kick it off.
Yeah, I'll confirm it.
All right. I think I can close this one. And fire up this one. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Taylor, Microsoft MVP in Developer Technologies and a solution architect for a consultancy called Increment. And it's really great to be here at the Brisbane Azure User Group tonight. It's my first time presenting here. It's a long time since I've been actually back in the Microsoft building because I'm normally over at the Brisbane.NET User Group, but I've got an Azure topic tonight. And so I'm really excited about this topic, and I'm really excited about AZD in general, because I've done all of these things the hard way. And to now have something like AZD that makes life so much easier really excites me. So let's get started. Oh, a word of warning. This is my first time presenting here. This is my first time presenting this talk, and I haven't done any practice runs. So I might have to take some of it a little bit slowly. If you have questions, feel free to speak up. If I bang my hands down on my keyboard, my apologies, that wasn't planned. Let's get started. So the Azure Developer CLI. I didn't have too many time to make slides either. I spent all my time working on the demo and solving the hard things in AZD so that you didn't have to. So the slides are really basic tonight. So AZD makes it really easy for you to get from your local development environment to Azure on the cloud. When you think about all the things that have to go into that, we have to think about setting up CI/CD pipelines. We have to set up infrastructure as code. We have to think about what resources we need to use on Azure. We have to think about security and credentials and so many things. And if you're new, or even if you're experienced, that's a lot to think about. Like you can build a 2-year learning and development plan to cover all of those things. And so for people getting started who just want to go from local development to Azure, this can be amazing. But I think it's also going to show its benefits for people who are working within the enterprise, who can then use AZD, create templates that are AZD enabled, and then share those templates with the development teams in their organizations and have this design ready to go for the applications that you typically build so that that team can get up and running in 45 minutes instead of 1 to 2 weeks. So that's what we're going to look at. The AZD provides best practice developer-friendly commands that map to key stages in your workflow. So developer-friendly, not developer-friend. So we've got AZD init. That's for creating a new application, which you can use you'll see tonight based on a template. Or you can actually just run AZD init and then select a template. We've got AZD and up that will package, provision, and deploy your application to Azure. We've got AZD monitor. Even the commands themselves are exciting for me. Like when I first started learning about AZD, to see AZD monitor, they're developer friendly. So you think you have an idea of what they do, but what they do seems amazing. So AZD monitor will monitor an environment that's running on the cloud. It'll bring up the application insights dashboard so you can see how things are going. And you can use AZD to switch to a different environment and run AZD monitor again and just fire up that dashboard. So we'll have a look at that too. So we use AZD, as I mentioned, with extensible templates that include everything that you need to get up and running on Azure. So your infrastructure as code, Bicep or Terraform templates are supported. Your pipeline definitions, so Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions, your dev container configuration, sample code, and so on. So one point of confusion is what's the difference between AZ and AZD? Besides the D, AZD is the Azure Developer CLI. So it's focused on the developer. So they're thinking about what the developer workflow is. So AZD is focused on things like creating and administering, Azure CLI is focused on creating and administering Azure infrastructure, whereas AZD is focusing on creating, packaging, provisioning, deploying, and monitoring apps. So it aligns closely with what we need to do. We can still use the Azure CLI to supplement what we're doing. And you'll see that tonight, actually. But AZD aligns much more closely with what we like to do and how we like to operate. So if you wanted to get started with AZD and you're completely new to cloud development, you're just really not sure where to go, this is the easiest way to get started. We just jump on over to aka.ms.awesomeazd. I'll zoom that in. We can look for a template. So this is the template library. All of these templates have been curated by Microsoft. They've been created by Microsoft or submitted by the community, and they follow best practices for deploying and hosting workloads on Azure. So we can say, oh, we want to use .NET and C#, and JK is here. He likes a bit of Azure SQL, so we'll throw that in. And we're going to use Bicep, and we have a look at the templates that are available. So I can see there's two really great ones there. There's a React Web App with C#, an API and a SQL database. That's got a little to-do app. And then, of course, we've got the reliable web app pattern for .NET. So we could actually go and use one of those templates now. We can just simply copy this command back over to the slides, and we can run it. So we run azd init. We specify the template. So the GitHub organization followed by the template name. Then we run azd up, and that will package, provision, and deploy our app to the cloud. And that's it. Like, we've got an environment running on local development that we can develop, debug, and we've got an environment running on the cloud that we can deploy to. We can keep coding and deploy additional changes to that application in the cloud when we're ready, just by running azd deploy. We can update our IAC. So whether we're using Bicep or Terraform, we can run azd provision to get those resources reconfigured or added, whatever it is that we need to do. We can run azd. Yeah, question.
Just wanted to ask about the template. Yes. Developed locally, so you could like download the template from Azure,
yes,
and not have to like pay storage costs because it's all on a local machine. Just making sure I heard that right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because with any application that you're building, generally you can run it locally, right? And so the idea is that with a template, it's got an application inside it. And so when you initialize that template locally, of course, you can have your F5 experience or your .NET Run experience. I'm very much from the .NET world, and you can run that locally, and then you can run azd deploy and actually provision and deploy that to the cloud. And so that's where you will start to incur costs. And so most of the templates will have a reference to the pricing calculator, where you can go and look and start to estimate how much with this configuration is that likely to cost you over the next month. But of course, there's lots of ways when you're just learning to configure your resources so that you fit within kind of those freely available resources.
All right, thank you.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so we can monitor out. That'll fire up a dashboard, application insights. And we can also power down our app. So if we're finished for the day or we don't need that environment any longer, we can just run azd down, and that's going to blow away all of those Azure resources, get rid of the resource group, and stop you incurring any costs on Azure. It won't do anything to your local code. You'll still be fine to run it locally and that sort of thing. And when you come in the next day or the next week, whenever you're coming back to that project, you can just run azd up again, and it's going to provision all of that for you again and deploy the application. So that's the easiest way to get started with azd. But tonight we're doing a deep dive, right? So we're not really going to look at that from that perspective. We're not going to pick a template and initialize with that template and then deploy it and see all that sort of stuff. There's really good talks online that you can see that demonstrate all of that. We want to go a little bit deeper tonight. So I wanted to create a template from scratch. And I wanted to use .NET 8 because .NET 8 will be released soon. And it's going to be the long-term support version, right? We're going to be using that at least for the next 3 to 4 years. And so I wanted to create that, but I also want to do something a little bit more. A lot of the demonstrations I see fall short. They get your application into Azure, and that's great. But what about multiple environments? So with AZD, you can create multiple environments, but what about a multi-stage pipeline where we will go ahead and deploy from dev through staging and production. So I'm going to show you that tonight as well. And I'm also going to show you one last thing. I'm going to show you how to actually create your own AZD template that you can use for your projects. If you've got a stack that you develop with pre-kicking, you can hit the ground running every time. Or for your enterprise where you're building a few different types of with a few different types of stacks, and you want to establish a template for your development team. So the demo app that we'll be building tonight is a web app based on ASP.NET Core and using SQLite. You can see the infrastructure there. I've kept it really simple. It's a simple app. So we've just got an app service plan, an app service instance, a log analytics workspace, application insights, a dashboard for application insights. And those are the resources that we'll be hosting on Azure. And isn't it interesting that even though it's a simple app, we've still got like 5 resources that we have to spin up there and create. And that's not a problem for us when we know exactly what we're doing. We've been using Azure for a long time, but it is difficult for a new person to get their head around. And so that's where AZD can help a lot. You don't have to think about, for this type of application that I'm building, what is the best resources and the best practices that I need to follow to get that application online. They'll have a starting point and they'll have support from the template authors, being Microsoft or someone from the community. So we're also going to use infrastructure as code. We'll use Bicep. Our CI/CD pipeline will be built using GitHub Actions. Remember, we have choices there. We can use Bicep, or we can use Terraform. We can use GitHub Actions, or we can use Azure DevOps. So these are the choices that I'm making tonight. And we're going to deploy and release to multiple environments. So we'll start with a dev environment, and then we'll extend that pipeline to support staging and production on GitHub Actions. I think the rest of my slides is pretty much demos now. So if you have any questions on the basics before we dive in, this is a great time to ask them. Yes.
You said AZD makes it easy to do stuff that would normally be hard.
Yeah.
Do you have concerns about juniors?
Oh, that's on the web.
Think so. Do you have concerns about juniors using it and then not understanding what they're doing, and then spinning up some huge thing that's over-engineered, and then like using the wrong template, and then it's just too easy, they accidentally over-engineer something?
That's a potential problem with any junior having access to do those things within Azure, right? So we still have to have some level of permissions, governance over the top of their Azure access to limit what they can and can't do. So we can limit, what they can deploy to and exactly how they will use it. But at the same time, we can provide them with the tools so that for the things that they are authorized to do, it will be easy for them to do that and easy for them to understand that. And it's not just for the juniors either. Like some things are just really hard to do and they're really annoying to do. Later on, we're going to set up. Yeah, question.
I was just going to say as well, maybe especially for juniors, like when they're spinning up a sandbox,
Yeah.
right? Like in early development.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe for like later parts of the development, maybe you have obviously a like a commit process and pull requests and structured releases and stuff like that. But certainly in the like early development, when people are just sort of working about how the services connect to each other and what the basic code should look like, then obviously spinning up a sandbox would be easy for like a junior developer to do to sort of move to the next level, right?
Yeah, that's it. And so they could have a subscription that only they have access to, or maybe different members of the development team have access to, but they're free to deploy some changes to that. So they could actually use AZD to create a new environment and then deploy a sandbox version of that application to that environment without too much trouble. Yeah, Brady.
So if I'm just concerned about like if someone starts using this AZD and spinning up all this stuff, and then they don't actually they don't know what they're doing, and they're not learning like how it works.
That's what the blueprints are for. The blueprints are there to help people hit the ground running so they don't have to spend kind of 2 years looking at a learning development plan to kind of get to that stage. And AZD is not just about juniors, it's also about making it easier for us as experienced developers who really know what they're doing. If you've ever tried to create a service principal with federated credentials using the Azure CLI and PowerShell, you know what I'm talking about. That's really complicated. And I think with AZD, it's just essentially one command, AZD pipeline config. It'll go and create that service principal, it'll create the federated credentials, it'll set up. And I'm going to sleep better at night knowing that one day I'm going to forget how to do that manually. But AZD pipeline config is the only thing that I'll have to remember.
Oh, with those templates, are they community driven at all, or is it just Microsoft adding them? Like, when do they add them?
Yes, so the templates are provided by Microsoft and via the community. And to hit the awesome AZD template site, they're reviewed by Microsoft, making sure that they follow the best practices, making sure they're documented correctly, have a nice little diagram and instructions on how to get started. So
Okay,
it's a good source. Yes.
Also helps with standardization and
Yes.
getting everyone to do the same thing.
Exactly, yeah. So if you have a development team and you want to build a template and try and get them building their projects in a similar way, then you can create an AZD template to do that. There are other ways you can build those templates as well, but I think AZD is really nice. Yes.
You configure your pipelines to interact back with, say, Azure DevOps. So to get around your juniors, you put your stage gate in on your UAT environment, so it needs to be reviewed. You get your seniors to review the code before it goes forward. They go, wow, you've just created 17 databases. Right, let's talk about schemas.
For sure. Yeah, and AZD makes that a little bit easier. So let's break that down a little bit. So obviously we're still following DevOps practices. We're still doing pull requests. We're still doing reviews. We can then, so assuming the pull request is approved, we deploy it to development. People do whatever they want to do on development, check the integration, then deploy it to staging. At that point, we might run kind of a what if and see what infrastructure has changed. With AZD, we can do that by going AZD provision -- preview. And that will put a what if in our pipeline for us to review. And we can put a gate there and say, and really, we're just talking about capabilities that the pipelines provide at this stage, because it's still just GitHub Actions pipelines and Azure DevOps pipelines. But we can put a gate there to say, hey, you should review the changes that are going to be made to the infrastructure along with everything else.
So you could run an AZD provision, which in essence, when I pull it down, will tell me what infrastructure is already approved for use. Is that how that provision works?
No, it's kind of like a what if when you're deploying a bicep template. So it'll tell you what changes are going to be made. Yeah. Good questions. All right. We'll dive into some demos then. So let's see. I'm going to start with Windows Terminal, and I think I can just hide that. There we go. And I'll zoom in. That. Change over to where I like to do my code. Okay, can you see that all right, JK? Everyone up the back, you can see it.
It's
A little bit bigger.
Good.
Big enough. Okay. All right. Tell me if you change your mind. It's okay if you change your mind. So prerequisites. We're going to be working with .NET 8, and so I just want to make sure I've got the SDK installed. I'm not going to show you how to install it. You're all smart people. You can figure that out.
It's a winget now.
Right. Yeah. That's it. And then I'm going to check that I've got AZD installed. So I think I'm running the latest version. It'll tell me if not. So the first thing we want to do with any project that we create is we'll go ahead and create a new Git repo. I'm going to put this one on GitHub. It's going to be public. It's not going to stay there that long. I'll probably blow it away tomorrow sometime. But it's not the demo that I want to share with you at the end of tonight. I have a template that I built, an AZD template that I want to share with you that documents how to do these things. So you don't have to worry about this particular repo. I'm just going to move this out of the way. Tell me if there's anything else I need to do.
just curious. Is it the .NET? Is it the one you've built for the .NET group and
No,
integrating to Azure?
no. So yeah, I did a talk earlier in the year where I took my clean architecture solution template and I added bicep infrastructure as code and a bunch of PowerShell scripts and set up pipelines and that sort of thing. That was all manual. So tonight we're not going to use that template. We're just going to build a very basic app, and we'll use AZD, and you'll get to see how much simpler it is and how I don't have to build any of those scripts that I spent so much time building.
It's already a lot simpler than what I've learned on Microsoft Learn.
Awesome. Okay, good. All right. So I can extend your knowledge that you picked up on Microsoft Learn tonight, then. That'll be good. So I love the GitHub CLI. So we'll go ahead and use the GitHub CLI to create a new project. I'm going to call it Increment. That's the consultancy I work for. It'll be a public repo, and we're going to clone it locally. It already exists because I didn't do my cleanup properly. So I'm just going to go start and blow that away. There we go. And we'll try that again. The repo, I guess that's gonna, that means that the repo probably got created. Name already exists, right? Let's go. All right, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to fix that because otherwise it's just not gonna work out how I want it to. And I'll have to change the name of the repo. And if I change the name of the repo, then all of my code that I'm gonna cut and paste tonight as a good developer is not gonna work. So we really need to get that sorted. I need my phone so I can do 2FA. It's going to be a whole thing, but it'll be much better for it. Let's see. Did anyone have a bad day today with the Optus outage?
Yeah. Brought in everything.
Yeah. I was worried that we wouldn't be able to access the internet, and my whole talk is internet.
Bought a new phone.
New phone, new SIM card.
Oh, okay.
For business to UAT and prod at the same time. So when they call their reindex, prods are off in 3 hours.
Oh,
Just as this is going back up.
I understand. I can delete that.
But on the plus side, there were fewer spam calls.
Yes.
No one tried to sell you electricity today.
I probably shouldn't be sharing that, but anyway.
I got one spam call at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So
Wow.
obviously they got back online.
All right. I think we're good now.
It's online.
Let's run this again. So GitHub repo create increment public clone. We can jump into that directory and we can go GitHub browse and see that one running, ready to go. So that's where we're going to do all of our work tonight. So next thing I want to do is create a new web app. So I'm just going to go .NET new web app, and we're going to specify auth individual. That'll just give us some nice authentication with ASP.NET Core identity on SQLite. Not that that's really important to what we're doing tonight, but anyway, there you have it. We'll go .NET build, make sure that it builds, and then we'll go .NET run and just see it run, make sure everything's okay. Should be fine.
What's -TL?
I never remember what it stands for, but it's the new kind of modern build process for modern terminals so that you can see things a little bit nicer and a little bit more good. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's best to see it in opposition to the old method.
Oh.
So there we go. So the app doesn't do anything. I could register and log in and that sort of stuff, but there's really not much point. We're about AZD tonight. We're about setting up a template, setting up a pipeline, setting up some infrastructure as code, and showing you how you can use that template. So if I go .NET build, this is the normal build. Well, there's only one project, so it's not really a fair comparison, but it's a little bit nicer. Yeah, there we go. I need my other project. It's got about seven projects in it. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, let's commit this first. So if I go git add dot git commit, what is this? It's a new project, and that's it. So we'll have a nice clean state to work from. It's good. Okay, so now we're going to use AZD. We're going to use AZD init. Now, if we use AZD init, of course, we can specify a template if we want to. We're not going to do that. So we'll just run AZD init by itself, and it's going to say, hey, the current directory is not empty. Initializing app in this directory may overwrite existing files. Do you want to do that? Yes. So the only thing it's going to overwrite is kind of git ignore, and it's just going to make a change to it, surprisingly, even though it says it won't. Anyway, you can see a whole list of templates here, right? And these two templates are a really great way to add AZD support to an existing application or a new application that we're using tonight. So you can choose from Starter Bicep or Starter Terraform. As mentioned, we're going to be using Bicep tonight. So that's going to add a whole bunch of files to our project, which I'll explain what each of them do. Now it's asking for an environment name. So AZD supports the concept of environments such as development, staging, and production. We're going to create a development environment. I'm going to call this one increment dev. Okay, and that'll come into play when we're naming resources and that sort of thing. If you would like to see a little bit more about environments, we can go AZD environment list. We can see the environments that we have available. Now these environments are very much local environments, but AZD recently added support for remote environments, which means that if we did have environments that were shared by members of the team, such as development, staging, and production, we could store those remotely, and that would be accessible to the members of the team. Otherwise, these ones are just local. All right, so we've initialized with AZD, and if we open up, say, Visual Studio Code now, and I'll just close this one that I had, we can see what's changed. So I've got this AZDO directory, which is for Azure DevOps pipelines. It's our templated pipeline definition ready to go. We've got our dev containers, so dev container configuration for cloud-hosted development environments. We've got GitHub and a default workflow for GitHub Actions. We've got infra, which I really love. Infra's got main.bicep, which is obviously our main infrastructure as code file that we're going to update and specify what resources we'd like to create. They kind of get us started there. We'll look at that soon. Some parameters where we can specify, say, the environment name and the location, such as Australia East. But what I really love is the abbreviations. We've got this really nice JSON abbreviations file with all of the standard abbreviations for Azure. So I don't need to think about that. I don't need to go and read the documents. You know, I'm the kind of guy that will avoid writing coding standards documents or anything like that. If I can use a tool or reference it online, I won't even think about it again. Happy to discuss it with the team and change it with the team, but ideally I just want a tool to enforce it and I'm happy. So the fact that that's there and I don't need to think about the abbreviation for case Redis, we can just all have that standard. So that's cool. We also have this core folder, and the core folder is what defined as the Bicep reusable modules that came with that starter Bicep template. So we've got some of the modules we'll be using tonight is like this, let's see, app service. So there's an app service. And so instead of creating all of this from scratch, we've got a module, a reusable module where we can just pass in some of the settings, and it's going to go ahead and create the sites, and we can look at managed identities and all of the other bits and pieces, app settings, application insights name, we can pass in key vault name. There's the app service plan. So it really makes life a lot easier to have those reusable modules. And, you know, even if you said, you know what, I don't like AZD, but I like that they've thought about conventions and organizations, and they provided all of these modules, and that provides a really great example for how to do these things. I think that in itself is a big win. But that's a lot less to think about. So anyway, we've got our git ignore. That was that one. Oh, actually, I wanted to add my own git ignore, so we'll go ahead and do that now. .NET new git ignore. .NET. There we go. No, I made it worse. There we go. Oh, that's all right. Yeah, I can force it. There we go. So it had a .azure in there. So we'll just go azd.azure. We want to ignore that because that's where our environments are defined. Okay, and that's just for local. We can have remote environments, but these ones are just for local. So you can see our default environment is increment dev, and here's increment dev, and here's all of the environment variables that are associated with that. And so yeah, pretty basic, but we want to ignore that. We don't want to check that in. What else we got? We've got an increment.slm we don't need. We've got this azure.yaml, and azure.yaml describes the apps or the services and the types of Azure resources that will be used. So in this case, it's empty, but we're going to go ahead and build that out. There's a nice example. So there's a service, which would be a React web service. That's the name of the service. The language is JavaScript. The project is located at this path. We're going to host it on an app service, and you can find the distribution or the package within the build folder. So there we go. Let me see. I think what I'd like to do now is I'll commit those changes, and then we'll go ahead and update IAC and Azure.yaml so we can run AZD up and get this solution onto the cloud as quickly as possible. So back over here, git commit cloud, and there we go. AZD in it. All right. So the first thing that I want to do is inside of the infra folder, so we've got all of our infrastructure code, I want to create a new app.bicep file. And I have very nice code here that we can look at. Okay. What's the shortcut for full screen?
F11 usually.
F11. No, that's not it. JK.
Try palette and put in, I think, Zen mode. There's something like Zen mode.
Yeah, Zen mode.
Yeah,
Okay.
toggle Zen mode. That might work.
Control KZ. There we go.
It wasn't like that on my screen.
It works on my machine. Okay. Now, if I press F1 again and toggle Zen mode again, and I'm just going to hide this. There we go. All right. So this is our app.bicep. Main.bicep is going to call it, and it contains all of the, it's going to create all of the resources that we'll need to host this application on Azure. So some of the parameters include the location, the tags, the log analytics name, the application insights name, the dashboard name that we'll create, the app service plan name, and the app service name. That's all going to come from main.bicep. The service name web is kind of interesting. I think I'll just drop down here and just update azure.yaml so you can see what that relates to. So if we go to azure.yaml and I pop in my definition of my services and the type of resources that will be used to host it, I've got an application or named AZD increment and a service named web. Okay, I won't take quite so much. We'll leave that little comment in there. There we go. The language is C#. The project is located in the root directory. Don't do that. It's better to have it in a source directory, okay? So it's not all mixed in together. So you want your sources folder, so SRC, your tests folder, that sort of thing. But for the purpose of the demo, this is fine. And we're going to host this on an app service, okay? And so we specify app service there. So back to the bicep that we started to create, the service name web is then referring to this service. Okay, and we can have multiple services per solution, right? If we're doing a React application with an ASP.NET Core backend, then we'll have the React front end maybe hosted on an Azure Static website. We'll have the ASP.NET Core API backend maybe hosted on an app service. We can have as many services as we need. So you can see here, I'm going to set up monitoring. So I'm calling this monitoring.bicep module. We can dive in and have a look at that and see that it's going to set up log analytics for us. It's going to set up application insights for us. So that module is making our life easier just by having it there. We didn't have to create it, but we can come in and review it. We can change it. You know, when we build our template, we can tailor these to match exactly what we require for our department or our enterprise. But it makes life much easier. We're passing in the tags across. We've specified all of the different names for things. Then we're going to go ahead and create an app service plan. We've specified everything that we want to about the app service plan. Then we'll go ahead and create the app service, which will be on the app service plan and using the application insights that we created. I ran into some issues earlier because I wasn't, instead of I was using application insights name here instead of monitoring.outputs.application insights name. And of course, one was getting created before the other, so it wasn't quite ready. And I learned that it's better just to do this. You can also specify dependencies between your services and that sort of thing. But yeah, something that I ran into. Specifying runtime version of .NET. They've got .NET Core, but that's the way it's specified. .NET and version 8. And we've got some tags. So we've got the normal tags, which we're going to pass from main.bicep. I'm going to say pass in a tag AZD environment name. You can customize these to be whatever you want. And then we're going to add to that AZD service name. So for this particular app service, it'll also have the service name tag, which is kind of handy because out of the box, the resource names are just going to use this unique string. And so they're going to be a little random token. Now, of course, we can go and change that, but that's fairly straightforward to do. So I'm not going to bother changing that tonight because then I might run into resource names that are already taken and demo failure and smash my keyboard. And you don't want to see that. So, all right. So we've got our app.bicep. It's ready to go. We've updated azure.yaml. So really, we just need to, question.
Will the abbreviations automatically get applied?
Let me show you how that works. I probably moved a bit too quickly on that. Yeah, it's really simple. So we come here, we load up the abbreviations. So we've got them all ready to go. And then when we're naming our resources, hang on. Wait, there we go. And when we're naming our resources, we just load the abbreviation.
There's no magic, which is awesome.
No magic. Yeah, it's very straightforward. And I was mentioning that we're going to get those kind of randomized resource tokens to name our resources. So the way that works, if you want to strip it out, which undoubtedly will, is you'll take out this line, which is generate a resource token. Maybe you'll specify a new parameter, your project name, and then you'll come down here and update all of these to use your project name instead of the resource token. So as I said, it's trivial, but I don't want to do that tonight because the demo has many reasons for which it can fail. That won't be one. So, yeah. So that's it. That's like it as far as we need to go for getting this app into the cloud. But we will run into one issue, and that's we're running on .NET 8 RC2. It hasn't been released yet. Maybe it's supported on the app service. It wasn't earlier in the month, and I haven't checked. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make this app a self-contained deployment. So when it publishes this app, when it creates its package, it's going to bundle in .NET 8 RC2 with it and pop that onto the app service. So we won't have to worry about what the app service is currently supporting. So, if in .NET, I'd kind of go .NET publish, but AZD is taking care of that for us. So I had to come up with a different approach. And the approach that I came up was just to specify in the application, can find it, where is it? Here in this increment.csproj folder, I can go ahead and specify the runtime identifiers. And because I've specified a runtime identifier, will automatically be published as a self-contained deployment. Okay, so that's nice and easy. You'll see there that I've specified 2 runtime identifiers. One for x64 on Windows, which is what I'm developing on now. So if I run the application locally, that's what it will run as. And then Linux x64 as the alternative. And then I've specified the default runtime identifier to be used when published, which is Linux. So a little bit there to get it to work with .NET 8, but all of that will go, I guess, in a week or so when it's fully supported, if it's not already. So that's it. Let's commit our changes and see if we can get it up onto Azure. So git add, git commit, and this time we need the brick wall. So everyone using Gitmoji.
Oh.
So, I mean, we shouldn't even be talking about AZD. We should just talk about Gitmoji.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here we go.
AI to detect the
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, you JK and SSW crew have got an extension that will look at the commit and the files that you're committing and figure out what emoji to use.
Valuable engineering stuff.
For the rest of us, I got to use this one today, which was cool. So you have the bento box to add or update assets. Another one of my favorites is beer. I code drunkenly. I've done it a few times. Never on work time, but we got infra. So infrastructure related changes. What about if we're fixing a bug? So we can prefix our commit messages with these little emojis and people go, oh, that's a bug, or that's a new feature, right? It's cool. It looks good. I like it. Yeah.
And another fascinating thing, we built the AI and now ChatGPT does it better.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It already knows what Gitmoji is.
Okay.
So we don't even need to teach it.
Yeah. Awesome. That's cool. All right. So that's Gitmoji. We've made our changes. We don't need to push anything up to GitHub yet. We're still working locally. We can pretty much just run AZD up now. I don't think there's anything we need to do. Now, if I run AZD up like this, it's going to package the application. And we have a command for that, right? It's AZD package. And it's also going to provision the Azure resources. We have a command for that as well, provision. And it's also going to deploy the application. We have a command for that, deploy. If you want to learn more about these commands, obviously you can go help, right? But you can also go docs, which I thought was very cool. And there you are. So it's just a nice little thing. Anyway, so AZD up will do all of those three things for us. But if this is our first time kind of building this app, adding support for AZD, we might want to run those things separately. So AZD package to check that AZD can build our application, find all of the services, have a look at the packages that it creates. Then we might want to run provision. We might even want to run provision right with a preview. Get there. So we could run it with a preview to see what changes it's going to make in the cloud. Obviously, it's not going to make any changes right now, but we can still see if everything's working well. And then we can run deploy separately. So once the resources have been built, we can run deploy again. We can run deploy and point at a package that we've already built if we want to, or we can just run deploy, in which case it's going to package and put that up into the cloud. So I'm not going to run all of those steps, but let's start with AZD provision, okay? So instead of running AZD up, we'll run AZD provision, and then we'll run AZD deploy. All right, so I get to select my subscription, and then I get to specify my location. It's got defaults because it knows how I like to work. Been using it for a little while now. And it'll start to look at what's happening in Azure. There shouldn't be anything in Azure. And then it's going to go ahead and set up the resource group and all of the resources that we needed to host that application. Now, while that's happening, we can have a look on Azure to see the resources being created.
Or is it running back the location you selected so you don't have to get prompted again? Or?
Yeah, good question. And I'm so glad that I can answer it. I can't answer all the questions, but those are my favorite kind of questions. There you go. Yeah, and that leads on to something else really cool that AZD does. When you put in main.bicep, when you put the outputs here, they also get written back to your environment, assuming you provision locally. And so you can kind of start to build that out. So I haven't provided an example of that tonight, but think of your app service URL, your application insights URL, your dashboard URL. All of those things can be written back, the names of these resources. So you can have like a little quick reference. And it also means that once they're written back here, they're used by AZD as environment variables, okay? And so that means that we can use them again in our main.parameters file. So we can pass in project name, which is stored, over here. And the same thing works if we're using the remote environments. So it's a really nice little ecosystem of tools and approaches working here for us.
So does that mean you should give this to your DevOps team and go build this provision, all the infrastructure you want, all the settings you want, go, and
Yeah.
then we just pull down the template that they build. So whenever someone goes, and like a junior goes and changes
Yeah.
this location to somewhere else, you go, our comparison or new deployments have identified this on preview. Then you
Yeah.
can actually change something.
Well, so because the environments can be stored remotely, I'm not sure what level of authorization they have on that. So you can access those remote environments. I'm not sure if there's restrictions on who can update them. So I'd have to look into that further. That's one particular area that I haven't played with yet. All right, so if I jump into resource groups here, we should see our resource group. We've got increment dev, and we've got the nice little abbreviation prefix for a resource group that we didn't have to think about. We jump into here, we can see all of the resources being created. Looks like it's progressed a fair way. It's finished, it's succeeded, so that's good. So now we could run, say, AZD monitor and fire up the dashboard for that service. You know what, while that's happening, since we've got a success there, let's go ahead and run AZD deploy. So package and deploy, but not provision. There we go. So there's our dashboard. So we've got a nice little dashboard for our application. We've got an easy way to get to it. And we can get to the dashboard of any environment that we provision because we can go AZD environment, select name of the environment, and that'll change it. And then we can go AZD monitor. We probably don't even need to change the environment. Let me see. AZD monitor. Of course we don't. We'll be able to specify the environment. So we don't even need to have selected the environment. We could just run AZD monitor and specify the environment, and it'll fire up the dashboard for us. Question?
So does that mean that it sets up application insights for us?
Yes. So I specified in the template that, where is it? I used to know where it was. Here it is. I specified that we wanted monitoring. And so I called this bicep module monitoring, and it set up a log analytics workspace and application insights and a dashboard for us.
Did you have to install anything to get logging and stuff like that from your .NET application?
Oh, I haven't even considered that. The fact that I have application insights running is just enough for me tonight. I don't have to send any information to it. No, it's a good point. Yeah, no, I would have to still do the normal things I would do in my .NET application to have it send information to application insights. So
yeah, it might be too long on-prem. I think I've sent this a lot of things for you.
Yeah, I don't even know how long this talk goes for. So find out. Anyway, some of the other demos are a little bit smaller. All right, so where are we? That's the other tab. It's still deploying. We've had a look here at our dashboard. We've had a look at the different resources. So we've got app service, app insights, our shared dashboard, which we built. That's where you go to when you're on AZD monitor, our log analytics workspace, and our app service plan. Let me see. The app service is already up and running. We just haven't finished our deployment to it. That's happening now. Or it might not. Sometimes there's transient failures, but that's nothing to do with AZD. But the app service is running, so that's good. Let's see. So let me talk about what will happen after this, right? So we've got our application running locally, so we can develop and make changes. And if we're making changes to our application, adding new features, maybe fixing some bugs, then we can run AZD deploy as many times as we want and release those changes to that environment. If we make changes to the infrastructure as code, we can run AZD provision, and it will go and update the infrastructure running in Azure. We can run that as many times as we want. If we're lazy, we can run AZD deploy, and that's perfectly fine too. It'll do a quick check to see if any infrastructure needs to change. It doesn't take very long, and then it'll deploy your application. So you can just run that. In fact, I was worried that I might forget tonight. There's a really cool extension for running some of this sort of stuff. You just right click on azure.yaml and you go to Azure Developer CLI, and you don't even have to think about the commands, right? That's just there ready for you to use. So that extension is obviously called the Azure Developer CLI extension. So that's really cool.
If you run the deploy, will it fail if it's expecting infrastructure to change, or will it just change it underneath you with that prompting?
Oh, I don't know.
It's like maybe
Um,
you're not expecting anything to change, so you run a deploy.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. I don't think it does any kind of check for the state of the infrastructure. It will just try to deploy the service to the relevant location.
Like,
And the continuation to this.
Yes.
Do you have like a dry run to see what would happen?
Yes. If you want to run a check on your provision, you can just run AZD provision preview. So that's your dry run.
it's like the Terraform plan.
All right.
Does that provision get logged anywhere?
Actually, logs is a feature that is the provisioning to Azure.
Yeah, so if I want to know whether the developers actually tried to provision it before pushing,
Oh, okay.
does it actually log anywhere to say that the provision was?
Yeah, well, the provisions logged.
I think you want to see, has the preview been run before just provisioning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
It doesn't feel
no, I
like
don't think there's anything like that, but you can see when the provision last ran and what it provisioned and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay, yep.
So, yeah,
it's literally milliseconds duration.
You
Wow.
have to deployment slots there, does it use it?
yeah, you can set it up to use deployment slots, and that's just based on how you define your infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
There's a listing actually. We won't wait too long for that because there's plenty that I can do without it. But I have a listing of what's currently supported. Let me find that. That's kind of, oh, there we go. That was a win. Yay.
Limit to Optus.
Yeah, well, obviously.
That's the modern right-click publish.
So here's a listing of the things that are supported with AZD at the moment. So the supported development environments, local machine, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, Dev Containers, GitHub Code Spaces. This one's important, supported Azure compute services. So app server, static web apps, container apps in beta, Azure Functions, Kubernetes, but only deployable via kube control apply, and Azure Spring Apps in beta, and then supported languages, Node, Python, .NET, Java. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, we're deployed. So here's my app running in Azure. So if I click on that and maybe press Control F5 a bunch of times, we might see like a welcome. It just takes a little bit of time, but I'm not really too concerned with that. As long as it's deployed successfully, I'm happy. So don't forget, we can also run AZD down on that environment now. We just wanted to blow everything away. We're fine to do that. I won't do that because that'll slow up my pipeline demo. But yeah, we can run those commands as needed. So in the next section, I want to look at configuring the Azure DevOps pipeline. Okay, and we're just going to dive straight into that. So to configure the pipeline, AZD has made that really easy. As I mentioned earlier, in the past, for a pipeline like this, I need to go to Azure and create an app registration, a service principal. I need to define a number of federated credentials, one for pull requests and one for an environment or the main branch. And I need to do that for every environment that I create. I also need to go to GitHub Actions and define environments there and set up variables and secrets there to make sure that GitHub can communicate securely with Azure so that it can provision the resources and do everything that it needs to do. And that takes quite a lot of effort. It's quite a lot to learn. But look, with AZD, it's a little bit easier. So I can go AZD pipeline configure to do that for me. If I run help, basically describes what it's going to do. Configure your deployment pipeline to connect securely to Azure. You can specify if you want the environment and if you want, what's the other one I want to show you? The provider. Okay, so being GitHub Actions or Azure Pipelines. So we're going to run it by going AZD pipeline config. We're going to specify the auth type of federated. And so it'll create federated credentials rather than client credentials. And we're going to specify the principal name, service principal, increment dev. Okay, it's really important to specify the principal name Because if you don't, the principal name that we will get tonight will be az-dev-11-08-202. So you see where this is going? This is going to be a date timestamp. It's really not nice. So specify a principal name, you'll be able to find it later, understand what it relates to, and your life will be much happier. So it's going to go ahead and create that. It's going to make some changes to my GitHub repo, which is something that I actually wanted to test because I changed the order of a few things, but I think it's going to work fine. So it's going to make some changes to my GitHub repo. Let's go and see those. It's this one, right? So settings and secrets and variables, actions and variables. We should see some things starting to pop in there. If not, see them soon. So yeah, look, it's starting to create them there. Would you like to commit and push your local changes to start configured CI/CD pipeline? No, we don't do that. Okay, so if I refresh this page in GitHub, we've got the Azure Client ID. That's our service principal ID that was created for us. We've got the environment name, increment dev. We've got our location, Australia East, our subscription ID, and our tenant ID already configured for us. We don't have to do that. We don't have to run any commands to do that. We don't have to go into GitHub to do that. It's much easier. So if I go to Azure and into Microsoft Entra ID and to app registrations, we can see our service principal. So if I go all applications, we were there and then it jumped away. SP increment dev, we can see we've got federated credentials. There's not supposed to be client secrets there. I've raised an issue with that. I think it's fixed. It'll be coming in the next version. We should only see our federated credentials because we're only using federated credentials for GitHub Actions. It's more secure. It's a better way to do it anyway. So we didn't have to go in and create these. We didn't have to go in and write these out. And it's kind of, I'm glad that I don't have to do that anymore. It's a big load off my mind. So that's going to that service principal and those federated credentials will allow GitHub to communicate securely with Azure. Let's see. So we've done that. The next step's really simple. We just want to make sure that when our application is deployed through Azure, when it is packaged, that it can run on .NET 8 RC2. Right? A lot of the things we're doing tonight is because we decided to run on a preview version. I blame you guys as much as myself because I didn't want to stand up here tonight and present legacy code, and you don't want to see legacy code. So just a couple of little tweaks here. But fortunately, you know, the tooling makes it really easy for us. If I go .NET new global JSON, that'll give me a global.json file where I can specify the SDK that I'd like to use for this project. We'll also do the right thing and say, hey, you know, use this version, but feel free to roll forward to the latest minor. So anything in that 8 range, and we're happy. Yes.
That doesn't seem to work on preview versions.
It does.
It does?
Yeah, I guarantee it. I've done this so many times.
Script pipelines. You have to always manually update versions.
No, it works for Azure pipelines too.
Interesting.
I can show you how to make it work for Azure pipelines. Because that'll only take a second actually. Because I did it this morning at 5 a.m.
But I think the base version needs to be, you need to specify a preview version of the base version, right?
Right. Yeah.
If you specify like 7 or something like that, then it's not going to roll forward to a preview.
That's exactly right. And maybe that's what you're mentioning. So if the base version is a non-preview version, and you expect it to roll forward to a preview, it won't do that. But I think if we did want that behavior, then we can go allow pre-release, and maybe that will work. I've never tried, but I can tell you with the global.json in an Azure DevOps pipeline, what I do to get it to work is, so this is what I did this morning. I got up at 5 a.m. and I built this new AZD template so that I'd have something cool to share tonight. So that's what I did instead of going for a run, which was the right choice. I made this diagram. I did borrow a lot of this README from the existing templates, so full disclaimer. But that diagram I made myself in Visio. I had to download and install Visio. But I've got this enable optional features right here. And I feel like in here, somewhere between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., I might have specified how to install it properly. Let's see, that one. So this is it in GitHub Actions, right? If we run that by default, it'll look at our global.json. But I don't think, now that I think of it, maybe I didn't do it for Azure Dev. Oh, I did do it for Azure Devs. I just didn't document it. Okay, we're almost there. So in our AZD folder, wait. I'm going to zoom out a bit. There we go. So in our Azure DevOps folder, which is where we'll store our Azure pipelines, pipeline definition, we've got Azure dev.yaml. And here we run use.net, install the, don't go away, install it and use global JSON. So I'm not sure if that's maybe a piece of a puzzle or if it was the other thing, but I'm definitely installing preview versions.
Yeah, it worked for preview version, but for instance, going from RC1 to RC2, it didn't roll forwards.
Yeah.
Even though we used use preview and
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
It just refused to do that.
Okay.
So we had to update the numbers manually.
Yeah, that makes sense because that's something I definitely have to try.
But .NET 6 and .NET 7, the non-preview version worked perfectly fine.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a global.json. We specified, I didn't mess that up, didn't I? We specified our SDK. And so then we just need to install the .NET SDK as part of our pipeline. So if we go to our workflow here, we'll do it. Where we can do it, maybe here will be fine. Okay, so we should have a quick look at this, right? So this is our GitHub Actions CI/CD pipeline. It's a really simple one. It supports branches main or master. We're running on main. It specifies the permissions required for OIDC using that service principal and those credentials. It's going to run on Ubuntu. It's going to bring in those environment variables that we saw before. It's going to check out our source code. It's going to install .NET. In our case, because it's going to use global.json, that means, you know what, I'm just going to commit this and then we'll keep talking about it.
That looked like I was trying to pull in the Azure credentials. Is that part of the bug that you mentioned?
No, that's not a bug. Well, maybe it is.
That's the client secret.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what that is. I don't think it's a bug. If you have a look at the code, you can see that, hey, if there's a client ID specified, we're going to use federated credentials.
Okay, so this is just a generic template that's set up to work based on whatever you did.
Yeah, and we'll strip all that out. Okay. It won't take long. Anyway, I'm going to commit that. Oh no! All right, that was. Oh, hang on, it kind of did work. All right, so that's going to push as well. So that's pushed. So that should kick off our pipeline. That means we can just go back to talking about this. So what do? We install .NET, .NET 8 RC2, we install AZD, we log in with our federated credentials. So AZD auth login, I didn't show you that, but that's what I did before I started the demo. I logged into Azure. I selected the subscription that I wanted to use and all that sort of thing. We can ignore that because we're not using client credentials. And then here, we're running two things. We're running AZD provision, and we've specified don't prompt us. And we're passing in the environment name, Azure location, and the Azure subscription ID. AZD supports a whole bunch of environment variables, which are really well documented. So you can just go and check what those are. Then we're going to deploy the application. Again, we don't want to be prompted, just do it. And of course, to make that work, we have to have all of the right parameters available, all the right environment variables available, which we've done. And so then it'll go and deploy that. So this CI/CD pipeline that really should be running now is going to build and deploy a single environment. So if we go here, it looks like it's kicked off pretty well. If we jump in, yeah, so it's already provisioned the infrastructure, which would have taken no time, right? Because the infrastructure was already there. Success, there are no changes, right? And that's exactly what will happen if you run AZD up all the time. It'll just check, and if there are changes, it'll provision. If not, it'll continue. So it's going ahead and deployed the application. So we could go over here and see it running a little bit better. Still not showing me anything, which could be a demo failure, but let's find out. I'll just go ahead and restart it. So resource groups. So this is our app service. Restart. And I'm not too worried about that, to be honest. If it is a failure, I'll find it and I'll update the code. But really, it's about provisioning and setting up the infrastructure, setting up the template, and learning how to use AZD. But I'll be surprised if it is. Okay, well, that's happening. So let's see, we've got to look at all of that. Okay, so now we're at the stage where we've set up the pipeline, right? We've got a single environment, we've set up the pipeline. Anytime we make some changes, we can commit and push those changes, and it will automatically deploy those changes to our development environment. So that's a pretty good place to be, but that's not really where we end things as enterprise developers, right? We need additional environments. We want development, we want staging, we want production. And I haven't seen a lot of information online on how to do that. So that's what I'm going to show you next, is how to use AZD, but actually create a multi-stage deployment pipeline. Oh yeah, thanks. Good. I didn't think it was going to fail in that way. So to create a multi-stage deployment pipeline that creates one package, not many packages, and deploys it to many environments, one package that's then uploaded as an artifact and then deployed to development, staging, and production. Okay. All right. So let's dive straight into that. So the first thing that we've seen is we know that we've got support for many environments. So we'll create some new environments straight away. So if I just go AZD environment new, and we go increment, staging, we've got a staging environment, and that's now the default environment, okay? So that's the environment that's currently selected. So if we run our command, we don't need to specify the staging environment. We're good to go. So what I want to do now is actually configure the pipeline for that environment. So that's going to go ahead and set up the app registration, the service principal. It's going to set up the federated credentials. It's going to go and overwrite some stuff in GitHub Actions, which is not great, right? Because at the moment, what we have in GitHub is we have just repository level variables. But we'll need to move away from that now. We want to have support for GitHub environments, and we'll want that Azure Client ID to be represented 3 times, one for each environment. But anyway, I will fix all of that up as we go. It doesn't actually take that long. I was surprised at how easy it was to do this with AZD and how well things worked, even though it's not officially supported yet. In actual fact, it is something that the team is thinking about. They've got an issue there. They're discussing how do we implement multi-stage environments, multi-stage deployments. So it is something that's coming, but it's really nice to see actually how easy it is to get it set up regardless. So I'm going to not start the pipeline, and now we're going to do that again for one more environment, right? So we want prod, and then we want the federated credentials for prod. Okay, so it'll go ahead and configure GitHub again. Those 3 environments. And while that's happening, we head on over to Azure, and we go back into Microsoft Entra ID. We look at our app registrations, all applications, SP-increment. There we go. So they're being created, almost ready to go, probably ready to go by now. Let me close down some of these tabs. I always have to clean things up as I go. There we go. We keep that one. That's a good one. That one. And this is a good one to keep. So if we go into settings again, we now want to create some environments for GitHub Actions. So AZD has the concept of environments. Azure kind of has the concept of environments, and so does GitHub. So let's create a new environment. The first one, no surprise, it's going to be called increment dev, copy and paste. So we'll configure that environment. And then I'm just going to go ahead. I don't need to do anything with it yet. We'll create another environment. And we're just going to call this one increment staging. I wish we could do this through the GitHub CLI, but it's just not supported yet. And then we'll create one more. You can do it through the GitHub API, but we don't really want to do that tonight. Configure environment. There we go. So we should have 3 environments ready to go. Increment, dev, staging, and prod. And if we wanted to, we could go and say, hey, you know, you can't deploy to staging unless Jason reviews it. Which is fair enough. It's basically just be me reviewing my own changes. So.
What if you did prevent self-review, but you're the necessary reviewer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here we've got the environment variables. So this one I want to keep at a repository level. This one and this one, that's fine. But client ID, I want to be at an environment level. So I'll create an environment variable. Bit of a confusion of terms there, but a GitHub environment variable. And I'm just going to delete this one because that'll be covered off in my pipeline. So we'll delete that. Yes. And here we'll delete the client ID. Yes. And then if we go to environments, and I'll go to start with dev, I can, wait, where is it? Down the bottom, add a variable, and Azure client, I can't get this wrong, so make sure you spell check it. Azure client ID. And then we need the IDs of the service principals, okay? So we could go to the portal and get that.
Or the magic folder.
Yeah, that's right. That'd be the easiest way to do it. Definitely. I'm not going to do that though, because I wrote the command to do it with Azure CLI. So we'll do that instead. So this is the app ID for increment dev, and we'll pop that in there. So there's our Azure client ID. I got it all. Okay, and now we'll do increment staging. Zoom out a bit, you know what I'm doing. Add variable. Azure client ID. Thank you. See, that's awesome. Good work.
That was a test. You passed.
It's not a test. I'm trying to do it right, but yes.
It's just try programming.
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, and then we've got increment prod, which I'm not quite ready for, but environments, increment prod, add variable, Azure D. There we go.
Now we pray to the Azure gods.
Okay, so if we go down to secrets of variables and actions, we get a nice little view of everything, which is cool. So there's our environment variables, all of our client IDs for the different environments, and there's our repository variables. We don't have to hide any of that. It's not secrets, so that's nice and easy for us to work with. What else do I have to do? Create and configure the GitHub environments. We did that. We set up the client IDs. We used the Azure CLI one time tonight, which was cool. We've got to reconfigure the Azure service principals. Okay, and this is actually pretty easy. So if we go into these service principals and we look at increment dev, we go to these certificates and secrets. I'll zoom in a little bit, not that much, and jump to federated credentials. Is that can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one here, main, this is the one that I want to change. Currently, this credential is used for the main branch only, but we actually want to change the entity type to environment and specify increment dev as the environment. So we can use this credential for the increment dev environment now. So I'll go ahead and update that, but I'll just copy that into clipboard. And I have to do the same for staging and prod, and then we just make some changes to our pipeline and we're good to go. Okay, staging, certificates, secrets, federated credentials, main, environment. So this is something that I'm really looking forward to support coming from AZD, so that we don't have to do this. I couldn't do this as a new developer, and probably a lot of you wouldn't want me to do it as a new developer anyway. So there we go, certificates and secrets. But I've documented all of this, so you can just follow along my guide if you like. So we're on prod now, increment prod, environment, increment PRD, update. All right, so all we have left to do now is to update the pipeline definition. Our service principals are set up, GitHub is configured correctly, credentials are right. So let's go ahead and change our single environment pipeline into a multi-environment pipeline. So remember, we've got our GitHub workflow stored here in GitHub workflows, and we're going to simplify this. Let's see, let me get rid of some comments. I don't know. I want to clean this up a little bit. You know what, in the interest of time, let's bring it back to this level. So we've got our workflow running on branches main or master, permissions required. We're just passing in two environment variables, the tenant ID and the subscription ID. We still check out the code, we still set up .NET, we still install AZD, but now instead of going straight into provision and deploy, we just want to package our application, right? This is just the build. So we're packaging a particular service. Okay, so we're packaging the web service. Now we can run this for each service that we have and create distinct packages. So AZD package web, remember that service is defined in azure.yaml, right? So it's this service that we're interested in. And the output path is going to be dist web.zip. Now environment none have been specified. I had to talk to the AZD team about this because I kind of said, why do we have to specify environment? We're just creating a package. We don't want to create different packages for different environments and deploy them. We want one package that we deploy to many places. And eventually it came down to, well, actually, just the way that the CLI is being built, environment's kind of an integral part. And I look at changing it, but it's not going to happen in an upcoming release. So my workaround, they said, was a good workaround. So I'm specifying environment none. Obviously, that's an environment that doesn't exist. We're not expecting it to create a different package per environment anyway. So that's it. So this will create a package for us, and we will then upload that to the GitHub artifacts. So it's ready for us now to deploy to development, staging, and production.
So they're doing that so that any custom app environment variables can be just passed into the build process.
Maybe. Yeah, I couldn't see a way that it was being used other than the fact that most of the commands benefit from having the capability to specify an environment. Now I could here pass in an Azure environment, whatever it was, the name of that variable, Azure environment name, and it would use that. But I wanted to be really clear and say, hey, we're not using an environment here.
I think for some of the services you try to deploy, like web's usually saying all of them, but some of them need to be more specific about.
With the environment?
Yeah, so this stuff happening in functions. This from provision different disk sizes for different environments so that the devs don't.
Yeah, so we can control at an environment level the resources that we provision, because in our templates we have access to the environment that we're provisioning. And so that's something that's fairly easy to do. So we can change the size of our, say, app service plan and that sort of thing.
If you do it there, you can't control it per environment, can you?
Yeah, no, you can control per environment. Generally, you'll be looking at the bicep parameter that's been passed into environment, checking which environment it is, and specifying a set of configuration for that particular environment.
Yeah.
At least that's how I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question?
Is it really easy to map
different environment to resources and different subscriptions. So you have your like a subscription for dev versus different.
Yeah, it is. So just thinking about it from a local level, not from a remote level. When we have a look at our environments, we're specifying as part of the subscription ID. And each time I create an environment, I selected a subscription. So yeah, kind of trivial. Okay, so where did we get to? We were working on the pipeline, and we were just about to create a new workflow. And it's going to be called, give me one sec, just grab this part. Okay, so we'll create a workflow called deploy. Deploy.yaml, and we'll paste that in. Okay, question?
Yeah, I was just thinking with the change to your federated auth, something that you would probably want to do in that instance is lock down the environment to only be able to be deployed to from like the main branch, because now someone would just be able to like branch off your potentially protected branch and then say deploy this code to production.
Yeah.
And then you don't have defense for that at the moment, because obviously the federated auth now is only looking at the environment matches, so you still need to put those policies in place to lock that down.
Yeah. Good call. All right, so we've got our deployment pipeline, which is a reusable workflow that we'll use to deploy to development staging and production. So we can invoke this directly. We'll pass in the Azure environment name, and using the Azure environment name, we'll also pull in the client ID, which comes from the environment variables, the Azure tenant ID, and the subscription ID, which comes from the repository variables. Then we'll do as we did before. We'll check out the code, which in hindsight, oh no, do we need that? I think we do. I'm questioning myself now. It's because it's getting late. So we check out the code. We're installing .NET, the SDK. We install Azure Developer CLI, and we will log in using the credentials. We will provision our infrastructure, and then we will deploy from a package. Okay, so deploy will package if you don't specify, but we're actually going to specify, hey, download the package and use that to deploy our service.
So where you're umming and ahhing at the checkout, you would still need that for the rest of your configuration, parsec config.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So now all we have to do is update our main pipeline to add those additional stages. So let me see. Being from my cheat sheet. Okay. Get the two spaces right. Somewhere about here. Yes. Okay, so here we go. So we've got a deploy development stage. It's going to use that workflow. It's going to inherit the secrets and variables. It needs build to happen first. Build is the first part. And it's going to use the environment increment dev. And then it'll follow on with staging and finally with production. Now, of course, we can set up some deployment protection rules on those environments to specify, who needs to review it, how long it needs to wait before it can deploy to a particular environment, that sort of thing. But we won't worry about that today. I've got one on staging actually. So, all right. Status dot git commit. We will extend the pipeline and push that through. So if everything was done perfectly and there are no mistakes anywhere, that will work. Otherwise, it will fail. Let's see. It's looking good so far. All the time, it kind of just fails spectacularly straight away. But we're not going to sit here and watch that. That wouldn't be very exciting. So we can say at this point, the CI/CD pipeline will deploy the application development, staging, and production environments. You might like to configure some deployment protection rules, but while that's happening, let's think about the template. Okay, so we started out here tonight to build an AZD template, and in order to do that, we essentially need to create a project that follows AZD conventions. And when we actually used AZD init and use that starter bicep template, or maybe the starter Terraform template, if you like, we were in a really good position to follow those conventions. We had the azure.yaml file, we had the Azure DevOps directory, the GitHub workflows directory. We've started creating environments. We don't need those in our template because those are a local concept. But we basically got started on the right foot. We've shown that tonight we can run AZD up and provision and deploy and all of those things. Our project is working really well with the Azure Developer CLI. And this is the approach that we would take whether we wanted to add AZD support to an existing application or solution, or if we wanted to create a new template from scratch. So how do we get it to the next stage where it is actually an AZD template that we can use? This is quite simple. So if I drop back a directory and I go make directory, what do we got? Brisbane, Azure user group. Jump into that. Okay, so if I run AZD init and specify template, and I specify template increment, which is the project that we've been working on, because it already follows the Azure AZD conventions, we're good to go. So that is an AZD template. Now, if we want to publish it on awesome AZD, there's a little bit more work to do. You know, we'll want to add a detailed README. We'll want a nice diagram. We want to document some of the features that are specific to our template. That's what I've done in that other repo that I'll share with you, how to set up a multi-stage pipeline. But we're pretty much there. We can run AZD init on this template now, and we can run AZD up. Now I've built a lot of templates. Let me name this. And I've used the .NET templating engine mostly, and I've built Bicep, and I've built PowerShell scripts to do all of these things that you've seen tonight. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to keep working with AZD and doing it this way. This is much easier for me as someone who's experienced at doing this sort of thing. So yeah, I've found this quite powerful. So there's a contributor guide, and I'll show you where that is. If you did want to contribute your own template, you can do that. So actually, let's go to Awesome AZD first. So this is a great place to start. If you come here to submit your template, then you'll come straight to this contributor guide. But the reason that I'm showing you this is because not everyone in this room tonight and those listening online want to build a template, but they might not see the template that they need available. So you can also actually request a template. So you can submit a request for a template if you can't find it on AZD, and so they'll add it to their backlog, or someone from the community might contribute. And if you're not sure what to build, you can also go and have a look and see what the requested templates are. And so you might like to go and contribute one of those templates that someone else has requested. So yeah, there's a lot of really great information there for you when building out AZD templates. So the AZD team's building new templates all the time, and there's more coming in from the community.
When you pull that same repo down, is that effectively just doing a git clone of that remote, or is it only putting down like the template parts of it?
I believe it would be closer to a git clone. If we jump in and have a look
So
here,
like you've got all your same code and everything.
yeah. So if we have a look, if we bring it up, we should see our multi-stage pipeline. Yes. So
Yes,
our
you got
multi-stage
everything.
pipeline is
You've
in
got
there.
the shop code and everything.
Our environments aren't there because they were local and ignored.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for this particular template, of course, we need that README, and the README is in there. Oh, sorry, not for that template. For my other one, I've got a link to it actually. Let me bring it up. So, yep, that's that. So this is the template that I've built. And I won't submit it to AZD templates just yet. I will submit it, but not yet. I'll wait till we at least get out of RC2 for .NET 8 because there's a bit of fiddly work to do there. And I'll probably put in some demo code. But you can scroll right down to the bottom and you see in this next steps section, there's an enable and optional features link, and that details out how to add the support for multiple environments. So all of those commands that you need to run and all of those changes that you need to make to ensure that GitHub's configured correctly and that federated credentials configured correctly. Yes.
So are these templates composable at all, or is it just sort of like, here you go, here's your standard web app type thing, or can you take bits and pieces and mix them together?
You can. They're not composable in kind of the supported sense, in that you could kind of bring them together into one template easily. But you can certainly, they're all open source, so you can look at what this template has done, what that template has done, and bring those lessons into your code.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You want to switch back to the slide?
Yeah, no, sorry, I wasn't gonna leave that there. So some recommended resources. So there's my demo app, the to-do ASP.NET Core C# on SQLite. So it's got all of the documentation on how you can do what you saw tonight. If there's something missing that I covered tonight that you want to see, just raise an issue. I'll fix it up. You can have a look at the GitHub repo for the Azure Developer CLI. The team is really active there. Actually, it's really nice to be an Australian working with AZD a lot, because I'll post an issue and then while I'm sleeping, they'll respond to the issue and I can get up the next morning and kind of continue on. So, and then it's always been the next morning, like they're really active on this, which is cool. So there's the docs for AZD. If you just want to install it, there's a link to install it. There's the templates for Awesome AZD, where you can learn how to contribute or request templates and find templates. And there's the YouTube playlist. I only found that this afternoon because it was it was probably 3 o'clock. I was putting these slides together and I'm like, oh, what's some more resources? And there's this AZD playlist on YouTube, and there's like 20 videos on there. There's some really great content by the AZD team that you can go and check out as well. I'll leave that link up. Ooh. All right, so that's it. I hope you've enjoyed my talk tonight. If you did find the talk or you think you'll find the template useful, please give it a star on GitHub. That's how I thrive. The more stars I get, the harder I work on my open source projects. That'd be much appreciated. Thank you. Yes.
So I'll ask a question, Jess. What's the relationship with this with Azure DevOps? As in compatible, or is this a replacement, or is this an alternative? Or?
So you mean Azure DevOps is in like the pipelines? And yeah, so it's supported. So we have two options at the moment with AZD. We can use GitHub Actions or we can use Azure DevOps. So tonight I demonstrated GitHub Actions, but I have code working that's building and deploying through Azure DevOps as well.
So if you've got an existing Azure DevOps environment,
yeah,
you can talk to those pipelines.
Well, so if you've got an existing, let's say you've got an existing solution, an existing environment, existing pipelines. So what you'll be wanting to do maybe is, depending on the age of those Azure DevOps pipeline, is convert them into pipelines as code. So you can bring those pipelines into your code base. So
infrastructure as code, pipeline as code.
Yeah, everything is code. So here's our Azure DevOps pipeline as code. We didn't extend that tonight, but it's the same kind of steps. So it'd be good for in the interest of making your application AZD compatible to bring those pipelines as code into the project. So converting the old ones into the new ones, and then all of the other bits and pieces that go with it.
Going forward, you don't use Azure DevOps pipelines anymore. You could use this, or
you do. There's two ways. There's the classic way, which is the way that you might be using now, where you can drag and drop and piece things together. And then there's the code way, so that you're using YAML. So both ways are currently supported. But yes, with Azure Developer CLI and the templates, the convention is to use pipelines as code.
You can go into most of the classics and say, show me this as YAML and it'll do this.
Just
for you.
generate. Are you already using?
Well, I'm actually on a project which I'm not doing this stuff, but we're about to inherit a whole heap of Azure DevOps pipelines that someone else has built.
Yeah.
And I'm just really curious about whether we would leave them how they were or whether we look at the project and moving.
Yeah.
Ask who built the DevOps pipelines you're going to
Yeah.
inherit. I find if the devs have created the DevOps pipelines, they can be an absolute mess. If you've had someone in DevSecOps creating them, you'll find that it's, yeah.
I mean,
DevOps guys will normally look at your environments more than
okay.
the devs will. The devs will usually start by building it, getting it working, and then environments come afterwards. Which isn't a problem, but it's just you usually can see some legacy.
So we've seen Bicep support. Is there
Yes.
also a Pulumi support page?
No, currently Bicep and Terraform. Okay. Yeah, so maybe that'll be something that comes in the future.
I'm assuming that's normal Terraform, not the open tier.
I have no idea. Terraform is on my list. It's on my 2-year-long learning and development plan that I have to get to. So,
But probably don't go the Terraform route now. Go the,
yeah.
the other Terraform.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Have you got experience with it failing and how it handles errors when it's deploying multiple Azure resources?
A little bit. I've been working with it for about probably 3 months now, and a couple of production applications. And yeah, I've seen the failures and it's not too bad. I think there's a little bit of a way to go in terms of support for logging as part of the provision and the deployment process. I expect that's coming. That'll help, but the journey hasn't been too bad. It's been a major improvement on doing it all manually.
Thank you.
Last question. Nice.
Awesome,
Ben.
awesome presentation, and everybody knows who comes to this group regularly that we always appreciate our speakers.
Perfect. Thank you. That's so nice.
Yeah.
I love it.
So next month, I think our meeting is, what's the date? It's not the 8th, it's the 13th, I think, of December. It'll be the second Wednesday of December. And that's our last meeting of the year. We had 2 speakers lined up for that one. So yeah, definitely come along and check it out. If you go to the meetup page right now, it'll say to be announced, but I'll get the details up there this week. And give us about a week and we'll hopefully get the recording tonight posted as well. So thanks everyone for coming out. The only thing I'll ask you is if you brought any bottles or cups or anything in here, just bring them outside the table. Have a safe trip. Thanks everybody.